part 3 in the slipper chair slipcover series, cut and pin your slipcover. Step 1 is calculating your yardage. Step 2 would be make your welt. Step 3 is to cut your fabric and pin it together. If you want to see part 1 and part 2, you can in the description below. So let's get started with cutting and pinning. The first way is to just drape your fabric over your piece and basically just cut around your piece of furniture. I have a full video on a sofa slipcover that I draped, and you can watch that video in the description box below. Or you can draw out your plan and cut your pieces on your cutting table or on your dining room table or on the floor, wherever you have space to cut. The reason why you would want to drape your piece of furniture is, for instance, if you're in a client's home and you can't lay out the fabric anywhere, or if you're doing a large piece of furniture like a sofa, sometimes it's easier just to drape it on the piece and then cut around rather than trying to lay out a whole 84-inch piece of fabric somewhere and cut it. So in this instance, I already drew out a plan, so we're going to cut the fabric on my cutting table. This is the fabric that I'm using. It's a linen from the fabric-store.com, and I'll link it below, but I have a very limited amount of this fabric to make 2 slipper chairs. I only had 9 yards of fabric, and I'm making the 2 slipper chairs, and both of them have a ruffled skirt, so that takes a lot of fabric. So I calculated my yardage. This is the download that I told you about. I drew out my cuts. I'll show you the back too. And this was the last cut. This is the cut for the skirt. This is exactly the cuts that I'm gonna make. I've got 2 pieces, the inside back and the outside back. Both of them are 27 inches high or tall. One of them's 25 and one of them's 26. My fabric is 56 inches wide. I wrote 54, but it's actually 56, so I can get those both pieces out of one width. And then this is the deck piece, and then these 3 pieces are the sides and the back. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I already cut the inside and outside back, and I put that over there on the chair. Now I'm going to cut the deck and then these pieces here. It needs to be 25 inches long by the width of the fabric. 25 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a thread here because I do want to make sure that this cut is very straight, square, and on grain, because I don't have any room for waste. I've got to make sure that this cut is very square so that then the next cut is perfectly square. And it should be, as long as my first cut there is square, but I have 0 extra fabric. I'm just going to do this. Pulling the thread so that I can cut right on that line, and I know for sure that this will be square. Okay, so now this piece needs to be cut into a 27-inch wide piece by 25 for the deck, and then 3 pieces at 9 inches a piece. So I'm going to take this over to my ironing table and press this because I won't be able to get a good clean cut because it's so wrinkled. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 3 pieces and sew them together because it needs to be one long piece to go over the top and sides of the chair. Before I do that, I'll go ahead and cut the rest of my fabric. So now I need 28-inch pieces for the skirt because I'm going to self-line the skirt, which means the skirt will be 14 inches from the floor to the deck, and I'm going to just do it in half like this so that this raw edge gets sewn into the seam and the bottom of the skirt is the fold. That way I don't have to have any kind of hem along the bottom of my skirt. And it makes the skirt heavier and it makes it just hang really, really nice. Now, the last bit of fabric that I have here will be for the cushion, and that's for the next video. So let's get on to pinning the slipcover. Before I even start to pin fit this, I have to take this cushion off, and this cushion is a attached cushion, so I'm gonna have to cut it off. So now the cushion's off. Best to just leave this in place, just like this. Okay, now we can start pin fitting. Grab my pieces. So this is the 9-inch strips that I sewed together and serged the seams. So that goes up here. It worked out pretty well. The measurements that I have a seam here and a seam here, evenly on both sides. And then these two pieces are the inside back and the outside back. So I'll just lay that there. I got my pot o' pins right here. My front one just will kind of sit there. And then my deck piece is this, and this one will go here. Okay, now I've got to grab my welt because the welt gets pinned in as you go. Okay, and a quick word about the pin fitting. We are doing a reverse pin fit, which means that we are pinning this inside out. If you notice on this piece here, we've got the seams out. Keep that in mind when you're doing this, that if you have a patterned fabric, your fabric is going to be wrong side in. That's what reverse pin fitting is. You're doing it inside out. So I've got my welt, I've got my pot of pins, my scissors. That's all you'll need. So I always start with the inside back, making sure that you have it inside out and making sure that your fabric is not crooked. Make it straight and square. And I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple pins in this too so that it'll stay this way, because I'm going to be doing a lot of shifting around here. And I'm gonna run welt down the sides and across the top and down the other side, front and back. So on both, it's going to create like a box there. My skirt will start from the deck to the floor. So I'm going to start the skirt right here at the deck, which means my welt really only needs to come to about right there. What I like to do is pretty much just follow the upholstery. So I'm going to run my welt right there along the seam where my upholstery seam is, and hold my fabric right there, and I'll pin this right kind of on the same seam. These very first few pins are generally the hardest. When you get a little bit further along, your pieces kind of hold together better. So this is really the most difficult part, the very first few seams. So I'm going to show you this one at a wide angle like this, and then when I get to the other side, I'll show you, I'll bring you in real close. So now we're getting to the corner here, and I'm gonna move this piece. And I'm gonna put a relief cut in my welt so that I can get it to bend easily. So I went down the front, the side, across the top. Now I'm gonna put a relief cut here and go down this side. Let me bring you in close. So we're getting to the corner here. I already clipped my corner. Can you see that? At the corner, you can do a relief cut, which is just one snip like that. That'll allow you to open up the welt and turn a corner. Or you can pinch your welt like this and do a V-notch like that. And that will open up a V there so that you can turn that corner easy as well. And then I'm just gonna follow that line of upholstery stitching there. And the nice thing about using welt is that you can feel it and line it up with your upholstery stitches there, and you can feel the bump of the welt, and so it just makes pinning easier. It also strengthens your seams. We've got the welt pinned all the way around the inside back. Still all flat and nice here. So now I'll do this boxing piece, the 9-inch piece, inside out. So I'm just laying that on there, making sure that these seams are even on both sides. Here's the boxing piece of fabric, and 9 inches is actually way wider than I really needed to go, but it worked out, the cuts worked out good that way. So I'll bring that back. Here's the inside back that I just pinned the welt onto. And now I will join these two pieces together. I'll feel where I can feel my welt is right up against my chair here. You can feel it there. So I'll make sure that my welt is sitting firmly against my chair. Then I'm gonna take the pins out and just repin them to include this piece here. Okay. So I'm just making sure that my welt is sitting right against the chair, keeping my front nice and flat and feeling that. Take that pin out. I'm actually moving my pins even a little closer together. Let me show you close up here. So there's my inside back fabric, there's my welt, and this is the boxing fabric. And you can see the pins in there. You can feel that that welt is right there against the chair. So now we'll go down the side. This is the inside back here, and I'm just going to follow this, and I'm going to need a relief cut here for this to lay down flat, but first I'm just going to feel and pin. So I take the pin out, put it back in, including this piece here. See there? So I'm just going to bring this up to meet, and I'm still feeling in here. I can feel that the welt is right there against that seam. Fit. Keeping that there. I'm going to take that pin out and I'm going to move it up. See, I'm just moving my pins a little closer together. Being careful to make sure that this piece of fabric that's here is not getting pulled off, so that when you get to the bottom, it's like this. So you want to make sure that you keep this piece of fabric straight and square, okay? And at the same time, you want to make sure that this front piece is not starting to slouch down or hang weird. We're still making it around the back. So that side's done. And now I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I started to pull this too far over, and had I continued going the way I did, I wouldn't have enough fabric to get around here. Now the skirt is going to start about here, but still that's really close right there. So I need to make sure I straighten this out, and if I straighten it out there, I've got kind of a ripple there, so I'm going to have to go back here and fix that. That's better. So now I've got this side pinned, and there's enough to go around the back all the way down, but I need to put a relief cut here because it's not laying down flat. So there we go. Now that feels better. So the inside back and the boxing is all pinned on. Now I can pin on the outside back. So again, I'm going to pin my welt on here, and because the front is now secured, I can probably pin my welt and this in at the same time. Let's see how that feels. What I'll do first is grab my welt, and I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece the length that I need. There's the idea, is to hold your welt and run it right along that same seam as the upholstery. So I'm going to start in the center, putting my fingers under, in that little fold, and I'll hold the welt right there. Bring this piece up to meet that and put a pin. I'm just following with the welt along that seam. This just expedites the process when you can just go ahead and pin all three pieces together right away. If you don't feel that's possible, you can just pin the welt to the boxing piece first, like this, that, and then go back and bring your fabric up to that and repin. Now the corners, so I'm going to put a relief snip there, so it'll turn down this corner. And I'll show you this corner piece up close on that side when I get there. So one thing to think about is you want your slipcover to be snug, but you don't want to pull too tight to where you have your fabric getting off grain. So you want to make sure that it's still hanging straight. I'll go ahead and start by putting a relief cut in this corner, so it'll make pinning a little bit easier here. And then we also need a relief cut on our welt. So we're gonna follow that seam. I'm gonna do my relief cut right there. Okay, so bring this fabric up to the welt, bring this one down to it. Now I can take these holding pins out, and you can see how pins are all the way around. This hangs a little bit loose, but that's the way you want it because you don't want it to be pulling unevenly on your fabric. So now we can pin this seam here across the deck and the inside back. And this seam does not, there's no welt here. For this part on this piece here, you want to be able to tuck some of that fabric in. So what I do is I kind of push the fabric down into there, both pieces. Just kind of move it between your fingers until both pieces are pushed in there, not tucked in, but pushed back there as far as you can. Then I kind of bring it back out a little bit in order to be able to put the pins in. And I just put the pins straight across, kind of out here, just out a little ways. That way, once there's a seam there, that seam can just be pushed and tucked into the crevice there. And it doesn't need to be a lot tucked in because there is a cushion that will hold it all in place, just about an inch. And then when I get to the corners, I generally will bring that in fabric, so I'll bring that in a little ways, and I'll probably have to put a relief cut there, depending upon the shape of your chair. There, that will allow that to curve back around there a little bit and bring your pins in tighter. Do the same over here. And the next step, I'm going to go ahead and pin the welt on to the whole outside bottom of the body, and then the skirt will be attached to that. So let me show you how to pin the welt on, and then let me also give you this one pro tip here with the welt on the sides that'll help tremendously when sewing it together. Okay, so this is the side of the chair, and the skirt will get sewn on right here. So even with the deck, and it'll come straight across here and around the back. The welt will be sewn into this seam to make that easier to sew over this welt, because when we sew this, we're going to be sewing this fabric, the 2 layers of welt, plus this fabric, plus the fabric that's going across here. So it's going to be 6 layers of fabric here, not to mention the cording. So the best thing to do at this point, before you get to the point of pinning on your skirt piece, is open up the welt and cut out the cording right above where you think that the skirt is going to be sewn on. That way, when you are sewing this, you'll sew right underneath the cording, so you're not having to sew over the cording, because not only does it make it harder to sew over for your machine to jump over that, but it also creates a bit of a lump in your skirt, so your skirt won't hang completely flat. It'll kind of want to come out like that. I'm going to do that on all of my corners. This is way long. So now pinning on the welt, I would like for my join to be in the back of my chair, so I'm going to give that a little extra to go around the back. And then this part, we're going to pin right at the edge of the chair. And that's about it. If you want to see how I put the gathered skirt together and attach it to the slipcover, click on that video on the screen right here.